Hi guys, so when I was preparing for this TED Talk, I told myself to start from the absolute basics, because I had a clear idea of what I wanted to include in it, but I had no clue how to start. So I decided to get to know my topic from a different point of view. So I simply asked my grandma, what is feminism? Easy question, isn't it? Well, I'm pretty sure that most of you would be able to answer me right now without even thinking. It's a movement fighting with discrimination against women, she said. I mean, it's definitely a fair answer, but is it actually correct? Well, not really. My relationship with the whole feminism thing used to be quite weird, because I always knew that it exists, and I knew that I definitely stand for it. You know, I was happy that I can wear pants, I get to vote and express my opinions. And that's actually where my knowledge ended, so I basically had the same way of thinking as my grandma, which is quite ironic for a Gen Z. But one day, I saw and heard something that completely changed my own definition of feminism. And it was a certain kind of a song, sang by a certain kind of a person, and that person was a riot girl, and her name was Kathleen Hanna from a band called Bikini Kill. A woman that made me realize that feminism is so much more than just wearing pants. You know, when I looked at her, she made me think, oh my god, I wish I was a riot girl just like her. But you all may be wondering, who is a riot girl? I mean, who is that girl and why does she want to riot? Well, a riot girl is a feminist, that's for sure, but it's a different kind of feminist. This term was born in the US in the 90s, thanks to the frustrated teenagers and young adults who were let down way too many times by the American dream, because it was not enough for them, and they saw the flaws of it. Their parents will always paint the country as an amazing place to live a good, fulfilling, and free life. Land of free, am I right? But well, how can it actually be free if the way you should be living is assigned to you the second you're born? I mean, it's a classic matter that we're dealing with to this day. Men should be protecting their families, working hard, getting the education they deserve, and not even think about showing any kind of emotion, while women should be worrying about how many kids they are able to push out without completely destroying their bodies. And I mean, you don't need education for that. You can only imagine how frustrating it must have been for a person that had a clear idea of what they wanted to do in the future, but it had actually nothing to do with a model that worked for their parents. And by the way, it didn't really work, because it was pushed on them by the media and an annoying neighbor that isn't willing to show any weaknesses to harm their reputation. So the kids were not only traumatized from not being socially accepted, but were also often coming from broken, filled with addiction and violence homes. People back in the days didn't understand that kids didn't owe them anything because they didn't ask to be born. It's always the parent that owes them everything and more. The one thing that we have to admit is the fact that boys had more freedom, generally, especially at the music at the time. You know, the most popular boy bands would wear female clothes and then pull out the most sexist lyric you've ever heard. And my favorite example would be Motley Crue, which was a very famous band in the 80s. And they had a quite hit song called Girls, Girls, Girls. And it contained the lyric, I'm such a good, good boy, I just need a new toy. And you would hear that every day on the radio and MTV. And that's what drove the girls crazy. But don't think that I'm only going to bash on boys, because they are a huge part of this story too. But it was females that decided that they've had enough and want to be heard and seen. So that's how Riot Girl was created. A type of music that steps against all rules and it's free for everyone. Boys, girls, queers, jocks, freaks and popular kids. But no one actually wanted to hold their shows or play their songs because they were considered too literal and explicit for the older generation. So the Riot Girls decided to trick them and once again prove them wrong. Once the girls had put on long, beautiful dresses, painted their lips red, and dyed their hair blonde, they started booking shows. You know, simply because of the fact that they started looking more feminine. And once they actually played their songs in the arenas and people heard their message, they couldn't get enough. Rather than acting in a way women were expected to, they were confident and aggressive, using the irony of such feminine outfits. And that's on how blind we can be. Riot Girl was ready to point out the flaws of feminism that people didn't notice, and Riot Girls finally defined the main point of feminism, which is general equality. but somehow it wasn't reachable, and they found out why, and that's what I like the most about it. Here we have the most popular definition of feminism, the belief that women should be allowed the same rights, power, and opportunities as men, and be treated in the same way or the set of activities intended to achieve this state. It's better than the definition that my grandma provided, and that's for sure, but it's still not the definition of feminism that fits the riot girls' ideology. Simply because they finally realized that their biggest mistake was trying to reach the boy standard, which is actually just as broken, and it's because men are steps behind girls emotionally. And that was also the fault of the perfect society model. And they recognized the men weren't superior and decided to shape their ideology not only to be girl-friendly, taking on matters like countless rapes, violence, and stereotypes that they fall under, but also focus on destroying the idea of toxic masculinity that restricted boys from showing any kind of emotion. They changed their biggest enemy from white boy that never got discriminated to a women raping, boy beating, sexist, homophobic, racist, redneck macho. And the boys liked it so much that they started to revolutionize music using the rules of riot girl ideology, simply using the advantage of being a boy who will be listened to. One of the most popular bands in the world was actually a riot girl popularizer, Nirvana. Now that I proved my grandma wrong, and I hope that she realized that feminism isn't just for girls, I want to focus on the idea of my TED Talk. So why do we actually need more angry women with loud music? Because they herald a change. They are the change. You may not even realize how many parts of your lives were actually affected by the riot girls. The way you're dressing, the music you're listening to, because believe me, if not the riot girls, there would have been no Doja Cat. But it's still not enough, because in the future, you may find out that women still have less access to education, because majority of illiterate people in the world are women. But if they manage to finish their education and find their dream job, they may find out that they earn less than their male coworker, 16% less. And if you're a shorter man, you may realize that your coworker who's taller than you has a bigger salary, simply because of the height difference. And that's just a couple of examples that we have to deal with today. Riot girls may have abolished the old standards and improved the quality of your current life, but it's still not enough. Because we are simply willing to repeat the mistakes of the past, which is sick and twisted. So no matter who you are, raise your voice and fight against inequality, because that's what riot girls did for you. Don't let their legacy and the changes that they worked so hard for die. The future of the world is in our hands now, and we have to do some changes for the next generation. Thank you.